What's going on, everybody? This is the Wisdom Matrix, and this video is about something called, well, not something called necessarily, but the two levels or two modes of ego. But before we get into that, I just want to say that, the ego, what exactly is the ego, right? Basically, the ego is almost like a program. It's not actually like you or real necessarily. It's not. Basically, what this means is that you're basically attributing something that's basically not there to the ego. I mean, it'd be like if you called, like a machine, like say, like the Echo devices that we have nowadays. Let's say you actually like called that and said it was actually like, an actual entity or something like a person. That's what we do with the ego. I mean, that's another video. I might do that in another video, but basically, what the ego is a program that runs on two different levels. One of those levels is fear, and one of those levels is desire. And notice this is true even when it seems like there is no fear or desire. Usually, there's something behind that, and that's why I always say to look behind what seems to be there. You don't do that by forcing it, but by looking at it. So what do I mean by the ego works with two levels, fear or desire? Well, that part sounds easy, right? I desire something or I fear something. But it's usually more subtle and it's harder to spot. Like if it were just that easy, your ego would already be gone, and it does not want that because it wants you to survive. The ego was created so in order for you to survive. Some people say that the mind is the brain, but it's more nuanced. It's more complicated. But the brain does affect the mind, and the mind can affect the brain. But for the most part, it seems to be, well, maybe not for the most part, but to a large extent, the ego is the body's way of surviving. That's the best way of putting it. It's the best way of describing it. The ego is a way that the body and the brain and you could think of. It was the best way for us to survive. But we no longer need the ego to survive. We've gotten to such a point that we can do conscious evolution. You can watch my video about that. About what is the things about evolution that nobody tells you, or the truth about evolution, or whatever it was. So, what do I mean by it's subtle when it comes to these two modes of ego? Well, say you have a desire to be right. You're not just going to have a desire to be right. It's not going to be like out in the open like that, because if it were, you'd be like, oh, wow. And it comes about in ways of looking at things. So you have a desire to be right, so you end up finding something that may fit within your paradigm, or has a certain paradigm of rightness or wrongness, and you defend that idea. You can do this with pretty much anything. Like this is why it's important to ask questions like what exactly am I doing here? This is basically just improving this somewhat. What exactly am I what desire or fear am I trying to fulfill here? Because the way the ego works is it believes that it is it's lacking or something. It's incomplete. That's why it does what it does. That's why it attaches to things. Because it believes that, or maybe not even necessarily believes, but it feels as if, there's more that it has to do. It has to be complete and whole, and this was necessary in order to survive. Because if we didn't have this, we wouldn't eat, we wouldn't do anything. We would die as a body or a brain or whatever. So it's necessary to have this at least at first. But the problem comes about when it becomes the only mode of being or existence or whatever you want to call it, which is usually the case, from what I've noticed. Not always, though. There's always like a level of awareness there, but usually that level of awareness is very lowered because it's conformed by the ego, I suppose you could call it. That's not quite accurate, but it's close enough. Basically what this means is that the thoughts, your thinking controls your awareness instead of the other way around. Your awareness can sort of not necessarily control your thinking, but it slows it down or it changes it in some way. So that's why it's important to ask these types of questions. What exactly am I? What level? What mode am I in? Am I trying to do this because I'm afraid of the opposite, like afraid of not knowing something, or being lost without any guidance? That's part of the need to be right too. Sometimes there's a bit of both going on there. If maybe not all, maybe even all the time, I don't know, but it definitely happens sometimes too. They definitely feed off of each other, maybe sometimes. So that's just another way of trying to pin down how your particular ego structure works, because everybody's ego is different. Everybody has, a different way of looking at things. And this is why it's important to look at, even though I don't completely agree with the idea of personality, mostly because it, there's this idea about personality where you're stuck with it, but when you're stuck in the ego or idea of yourself, or this, just thinking level of things, there is a personality type thing going around, I suppose, because your brain and your body is hardwired in a certain way. This is why awareness is important. It kind of opens your it gives you more levels of being and doing. You could almost think of it as if you were like we are now, a 3-dimensional person, or a 4-dimensional person, or whatever, and we go into a 2-dimensional universe. We would be like gods, because we could enter and exit at any point from that level. We could turn things around at that level. This is pretty much what we would be doing. It's maybe not quite as fantastic as that, but that's what awareness will do. It starts to move these things around a little bit easier. That's why it's important to become aware of the present moment, become aware of what you're doing, what you're thinking. Another thing to notice too is that your mind will try and distract you away from the present moment by thinking or analyzing, or I don't know, anything at all. That's another question you could ask too. What is causing me not to be present right now? Like, what? Is there some mechanism that my mind uses to get me out of the present moment? Because that's another way that, the ego works. Because the present moment is what keeps. The present moment is what strengthens your awareness, I suppose you could call it. It makes you more aware. The ego doesn't necessarily want you to do this because it wants you to survive, and it's afraid that if you start focusing on the present moment, even a little bit, possibly you might make even more mistakes, and you're going to fail, and you're going to die or something. That's the fear mechanism. So there's a bunch to go over. There's a bunch that could be talked about with this particular subject, but I'll just leave it there. So this is basically just another way to pin down how your particular ego structure works. So anyways, this is the Wisdom Matrix, and I'll see you in the next video.